When I was young, my mother would send me, somebody's laughing, I'm still young, is that the, I'm maybe older than you think. So she used to send me to the basement to get the bread. We keep our bread in the freezer, best way to keep it, you know, we're German, we eat lots of bread. And when you freeze it, you can bring it upstairs, toast it, and it's gonna be really fresh. But I was terrified to go down there. Because 1 year after I was born, this guy was on TV telling me that glowing red dots are glowing red eyes of a rational killing machine. That is very interesting because that is the feeling that we generally have towards AI very often. You know, we have self-driving cars, and there could be people implementing the technology that has an algorithm that will kill you in the car if it would save 5 other people. But we also put trust in it in other realms. So for example, when we decide, for example, who will be a criminal, who we should let out of prison and who we should keep in, we usually look for police, people, but we increasingly also apply algorithms. Like for example, in Iowa, there's an algorithm determining based on the properties of an inmate whether he will be let free or whether the chance of him, you know, going back to prison is so high that he should stay there. Now there's an obvious problem there. Imagine you are a policeman, or imagine a policeman rather, and you have these 3 people. Who do you think will be most likely to get checked? I know the answer. I will not put you in that position. Yes, it's basically left to right, from more dark complexion to the more light complexion. Unfortunately, very often people have a strong association between black and bad and white and good. And the core reason is that there's a lot that is happening, but only a fraction of what is happening is actually put into people's brains. It's covered by the news, your brain thinks about it, and then it may pick up that in bad contexts, people mention that a black person is doing it, and in good contexts, the whiteness is mentioned. And also there's lots of other associations regarding to these 2 colors. Fundamentally, we can only think about what was once in our brain. There's truly, I believe, no original thought in any of us. We can name them differently, and yes, we can recombine it, we can fuse information together, absolutely, but we can only use the tools that we already have. So if that thought didn't go in there once, well, how could it ever emerge? So if you have information that is biased already, because you may only check one, part of the population that has a dark complexion, then you build models on top of it, you get these biases. You get a reflection of what is basically racism in your models, and if they make decisions, that's a very, very bad thing. A brain is created that is biased, that is inside this computer. And to show you how effective these type of automatic reactions are, I would like all of you to close your eyes. Close them tight. And now everyone with an uneven age, please open your eyes. And now close them again. And now everyone with an even age, please open your eyes and close them again. And now everyone with an age, please open your eyes and then complete this word in your head. And now tell me what you thought of. If people are still closing their eyes, then you are indeed tired. Okay, I'm really curious. Who said other? Who had something else in mind? Who didn't think? What did you think about?
I didn't see anything, but I saw the word stop, but I don't know why.
S-O nothing P and it stop? Definitely other.
Sorry.
Thank you. Oh my God. Okay, so usually this is like an 80-20 kind of thing. So it's still that it works right. It works, as you can see. But what actually happened is that half of you saw the left picture, some vegetables, and most of them completed the word with soup, and the other people saw the thing on the right, and they completed it with soap. You see something that is related to food, you think about soup. Something related to being clean, you think about soap. Well, what is this? It is the automatic association that your brain does that you cannot control, that simply happens, just like the policeman looking at the three people on the street. They have a certain reaction, and then they go for it. Now, that can be used, obviously, by marketing, because when you have traditional Chinese medicine, and you can talk about ginger and these weird berries and all calligraphy, etc., there's always associations that come with it. So if you have a detox, I believe Herbalife is, for example, in the audience, you can use lots of these associations to your benefit, because people may overestimate the healthiness of these things. And obviously, the opposite is true for things like GMOs. People overestimate the harm that comes with GMOs, and they're generally afraid of the Frankenfood coming to get them. Those are all automatic reactions that are built by the information that the brain computed, that it's processed, but they can be extremely irrational. Racism is absolutely irrational. We all have the same blood. I think even gender is something that is very, very similar in terms of what the brain in the end can do. But that is a big, big bias. Another one is, of course, class. Even associations with different accents. If you are from Wales, then there are some associations that come with that type of accent, for example. And of course, sexism. That we have automatic reactions seeing a woman or seeing a man that lead our thoughts in certain directions. So one of the things that I find most interesting that really combines data and these biases in psychology is when you actually plot in one of our models the different job types and whether the associations are more towards male, so that would be him, he, son, etc., and the female ones would be she, daughter, her, etc. You see that they line up in a certain way that actually matches how many people are doing that job. So how many haircutters are female and how many superiors and officers are male. So just by the association, you can predict actual behavior in a country, and in any country for that matter. And what we do is we go even further. We check how can we explain the difference between these two things with associations. And here you can see for Germany, and I'm not too proud of this, but obviously in every country there are these biases. You can see that the difference between men and women can be explained by, about 18% or something? It's not quite straight. Yeah, almost 20% by associations with functionality. Meaning that a typical person, when thinking about a man, will think about functional attributes, whereas for a female, it will be more about the teaching, the warmness, the likability. This is basically just stereotypes, but we have found a way to measure these stereotypes as they come out of the text data that reverberates within a cultural realm. So if the bias is in text in the country, we can pick it up, and as you can see, quite accurately. And you can obviously, when you have these entities man-woman, do the same thing for entities like brands, and check what are the differences in association that are evident within a cultural sphere. I believe there's people from SEAT around. Very happy. We are now starting a collaboration with SEAT in Poland, and this type of data is obviously very, very interesting there. So what is the message here? That we know that biases exist, and we also have seen that machine learning can help us to use these methods in a way to very badly categorize who will be a criminal again, and to very accurately categorize what type of biases exist in a culture. Data truly reflecting psychology. But we should be aware, because the chance is that we are making very ugly AI babies that inherited our biases. That is something that we really, really do not want. What we want is to understand what's going on, and then use the understanding to better your marketing, or, as I would put it, get more conscious perception about those biases so that we can change them. This is a very fascinating study from Nature, where they put people in a scanner, and they basically did what I just told you. They mapped the semantic network in the brain. So they had people listen to a story, and whenever a certain word was mentioned, they would then check which brain area was active. And if a word was mentioned that was here in this green area, the whole area would light up. And the other things that are encoded there in the brain region would also get activated. This is exactly what happened when you saw the vegetables, that the soup was also activated. And we already know that there are things out there like IBM Watson that can use text information to give you certain results. But the key difference between what I'm talking about here and Watson is that Watson gives you the objective, correct answer because it had to win Jeopardy, whereas our method gives you the sometimes wrong answer, but the answer that humans would give, because we can check the amount of associations from the question and the answer, and that predicts most accurately what a human will do. So we may not win the money, but we can predict what the human will do, and hence that is extremely important for marketing and branding. Now, let's go through the deeper reasoning here. This is a study from 2010, and it shows how a certain marketing material elicits certain associations, and they have found in the study that you can simply count the amount of associations that match the brand and the product features. Counting them enables you to then predict how likely it is that people can remember the advert and the more effective it is in triggering awareness and purchase behavior. If you can control the associations that you put out there, you can basically control what people are thinking, which is what marketing does, right? You present it over and over, people form associations, and there you go. So we already know that it works. The only difference is that here you can now do this algorithmically. Well, it is important to know what everybody thinks. That's how you get all these nice biases. But I'm also going to talk to you how you can then segment certain people. Because, spoiler alert, you can use the associations to predict the evaluation of certain consumer segments. But first, let's look at a use case real quick of applying this. So yes, here we say that we build these really big models, but what does it actually mean? As a human brain, and we all have one, you compute information. So it goes in. As you can see here, there's this tiny little line, goes in, and you, for example, read a book. But your brain is not saving all of the pages, all of the words on that book, in that book. It'll rather save the important connections that are represented in that book. And that is what you can see here. So these are things that appear often, that would be closely associated. These are things that occur not so often, and they will not be closely associated, weakly associated rather. So imagine you read about Lassie. I hope everybody knows who Lassie is. That dog will appear in a context of being clever and lovable, and hence your brain understands that is a lovable creature. Now, the computer can do the same thing, only 1,000,000 times faster and more effectively. It can now read in all the mass media that is relevant for a culture, social media, Wikipedia, movie transcripts, music lyrics, YouTube influencer transcripts, everything that is relevant in that culture. So this thing's now way bigger. But it does the same thing as your brain. It just checks how likely is it that Lassie is in a context of being smart and lovable to make the same conclusion, the same prediction that Lassie the dog is a lovable creature. But the big difference between this and humans is that humans lie to you. Because very often if you give them a question where the answer is not something that is very easily openly discussed, like for example, hey, would you consider having a female as your boss? Everybody will say, yeah, of course, equality, I love it. But then when the decision time comes, they actually don't do it. So you can see that the association is weak, and the machine is basically cold-hearted enough to just say, well, the association is weak, and hence the chance is low. As you've seen in the chart with all the job descriptors, same thing. It is already able to see what a typical person will do. More so than you would be able to do when you actually ask the person. So how can you apply this? And this is just a very quick example, and then I want to show you some new stuff. So one of our clients had the challenge that they had a shampoo, super sustainable. You may have noticed that there's a trend going on in the industry that sustainability is on vogue. And, well, imagine you can really drop it into the ocean and baby turtles eat it up and more coral reefs are being created. It's an awesome product. But they needed to communicate that because obviously you cannot put baby turtle eating, coral reef creating shampoo on the bottle. It needs to have a more catchy name. So how can you communicate that most effectively? Well, first, you need to find out what does sustainability actually mean. This study was in Italy, but I've translated all the words for your leisure. So sustainability, as you can see, is associated with many things. I first show the ones that are more strongly associated and then the ones that are more weakly so, but all of them make part of the sustainability association context. So you can see here environmental, ecological, green, etc. You can also see things like this decarbonization is very infrequent. It is associated with sustainability, but the chance that many people don't know what that is quite high because it's so infrequent. So the marketeer looked at this and was like, great, I'm just going to call it the eco shampoo. That would have been a big mistake, of course, because he's just expressing sustainability. What he needs to express is sustainable shampoo. So with this approach, you only need to add the meaning vector of shampoo, which actually contains associations plus the implicit associations. Like, for example, innocence and sin are connected with washing. They have found that if people do something not so nice and then they can wash their hands, they actually feel way better. They feel like the burden is lifted, like they're innocent again. And likewise, the shower is associated with social warmth. It's a warm shower. People that are actually lonely shower longer because they appear to enjoy the warmth more than people who already have lots of friends. Those associations are important in order to communicate what the shampoo can do for you. So here, what happens is you get the, in a Venn diagram, you know, what overlaps, you get the associations that are true for sustainability and for shampoo. And it doesn't take all of you, I think, will be able to see this. Many of these words are often on the bottles of shampoo because they do communicate exactly what I was talking about, something that is sustainable and good, but also has the benefits of shampoo. So the marketeer sees this, very happy. He looks at natural and says, great, I'm just going to go with the natural concept, works everything out, looks great, goes to the CEO, and the CEO says, great work, just one thing. And later we found out it was because his wife talked to him the day before. This should be more feminine. It is too square. It should be more round. It's too blue. It should be more rose. I'm obviously speaking in metaphors. So the feminine attributes need to come out. Marketeer, looking at the old methods, you know, weeks of inviting the focus groups again, running online again. With this approach, you only need to add female. You can add as many things, brand key items. It does not matter. And you can see some of the results that came out of this analysis that also made it onto the product and into the marketing material. And you can see the influence of some of these factors here, especially, of course, the female side. So what does this mean if you use AI in marketing? It's way faster. You get virtually unlimited insights. You have the subconscious, which I think is really a game changer because you can now model the biases that a country has, and you have it in those bottles. And of course, you also get the commercial success. We had the great pleasure here to compare this with the communication that they went with first, and then compare it to our communication, and you can see that ours was beating the original by quite a margin. Which obviously makes sense. If you can communicate with the words that the consumer knows and understands best, well then he will also understand better and then go buys your product. But now, I'm super, super excited because this is the first time that we are showing this, show you how you can apply this extremely easily. Because I think still, bias and all these things, it's fairly abstract. So here you have a website open in the browser, and you have a button up here which links the content in the browser to the AI. And you press it, and you immediately get, now in green and red, the words that by now the typical consumer, so the target group here is the general English-speaking consumer. I think it's the US model. And you can see which green is positively associated and red negatively associated. So you can see it for any content that you have in your browser. Could be your email, could be your scripts, doesn't matter. Now what you see in here is there was one word that didn't quite fit. Precision, performance and precision. Precision was not well associated. So with just one click, you can now see other things that mean the same thing. You can also see what other words you can use to express the same thing. But you effectively get an immediate rating on associations that how you can do better. So here, for example, rather than saying precision, you could say perfection. Am I doing this? Or you could say thoroughness. As you can see here, perfection has a much higher emotional load. And it's very important to understand what you're seeing here, because on the left side, up to this point, you can see all the basically general characteristics of these words in the culture. So you can see how strongly is it associated with precision. You can see how important it is, because how often does it appear. And then on the right side, what you see is what is relevant for a specific target group. So in this case, it is the general consumer from the US, but this can be changed, as I will talk to you about in just 1 second. So that's pretty nice, and if we go back to the actual page, you can now think about performance and perfection, or performance and thoroughness. So that was rather simple, and as I said, it's completely limitless. You can do this for everything. But what I find even cooler is we talked about bias. And bias means that maybe you want it to be associated with, I don't know, let's say adventure, because your new brand is like the adventurous brand. All you need to do is remove the emotion loading, add the association that you want to control for, and now obviously you can see that the word adventure is very green because it is the most associated with adventure. That makes sense. But if you then go through the material, you can see other things like experience, entertainment, you can see world, discover. So immediately you can tell what does your content do for the average consumer. So we like to think it is like having the consumer in your browser, always ready to check your content, and with one click you can see it, and obviously then if you click it again, you could improve it. And you can also see here that performance and precision has very little to do with adventure. It is something completely different. First you talk about all these great things, you know, emotional, exciting, but then if you come to performance, it's like, meh. So also they're interesting to see, why would you mention it here? Maybe it should go into another category. So now, how can we combine surveys in this type of approach? Let's talk about vegans. So imagine that we ask 1,000 vegans, and we actually give them words. We actually give them these words, like butter, family, tree, honor, and we have them rate them on these dimensions that you can see: valence, activation, control. We do it with the SAM, so this is a method to collect emotional relevant ratings that are independent of culture. Everybody can understand these mannequins and what they express. What happens is that you pick up patterns, because a vegan is more likely to rate things highly emotionally potent, the emotional loading is positive, when the word is associated with natural, healthy, etc. Knowing the associations for the culture, you can take from a survey the individual ratings and understand what is the pattern. Do they like a certain type of concept more? And indeed, that's what you find. And once you've found it, you can then put it back on all of the data that you didn't test. So you take it for, say, 1,000 people, rating 1,000 words. Now you can extrapolate that pattern onto 1 million words in your model. So if a new brand comes out tomorrow, or a new word is invented tomorrow, as long as it is associated with being natural and healthy, you already know that vegans will like it. And I think this is really the power. It's similar to what we heard in the very beginning of this day with Target, right? They had to have the pregnant people, and then they could extrapolate onto people that just came into the store and they bought the zinc and the multivitamins, etc. It's very similar. So the training set, the high quality, comes from the survey, but then you use the big data to make more out of it, to extract the pattern and really get this really, really big ability, I think, to do more. And one of the reasons I'm here is also to talk to you as providers to think further, Because what happens if you have passive data and you exactly know the funnel that people go through? I think it would be fascinating to then go in and really model what went on in those people's heads. What type of content did they consume? So what would be that consumer segment's association regarding anything? Because knowing what the public, what the whole culture wants is important, but knowing it for the individual target segment or target group, I think truly, truly fascinating. So I want to get to some questions as well, so let me just run through the summary. I think we came from a time where we relied, was introduced as the frustrated academic, indeed, because few data points means, I think, few learnings. Deep for that consumer segment, but weak for the greater whole. This has been the past, and it has now been made possible to truly get what billions of people are thinking by understanding where does the thought come from. It comes from the, what goes into the brain. So if you can model using machines what are the resulting associations, we can then also predict what is going on in the average consumer's brain. This is unfortunate. This is a big problem. This is why fake news, etc., is out there. And it is so frustrating to see it, and to see also that it is effective, because once the brain has seen it, it cannot unsee it, and it does influence our associations. But we can as well use it. And that is really the key learning here. We can use this, and as you can see, we can easily visualize it, and maybe then also raise the awareness that those type of maybe false associations, maybe stereotypical associations, bias, sexism, naturalism, etc., they do exist, but once you see it, maybe we can also combat those type of biases. To have the machine teach us how flawed we are in a way, but do that to our benefit. And to the benefit of vegans. So I want to leave you with this. When I was young, I was afraid to go down there because I thought those two glimmering lights would kill me. But I think realizing what these tools actually entail, how we have taught them to think, and that this can actually help us utilize it, gets you in the direction of thinking about machines as tools. Because those two red glimmering lights were the two lights of the fridge holding the bread. Thank you very much. Oh yeah, of course.
Thank you, Jonathan. I'm going to just ask a couple of questions. For anyone in the audience who has a question, please use the microphone. Why? Because clearly the guys that are watching us on the live stream can't hear your question if you don't use the microphone. So just make sure you just say who you are and what your question is when you get the microphone. Thank you, Jonathan. That was great.
Thank you.
So a couple of hygiene factors maybe to start. You talked about being a frustrated academic. So how many data points are in all of this work?
For a typical model, it would be at least 31 billion words that we put in there.
Sourced from?
All the sources that I mentioned. So when we go into a new country, we check what is most relevant for the target group. So in China, it's different outlets, different type of mass media than it is for Turkey or Mexico or Brazil. Mm-hmm. But once we know, we just check whether we already have that in our data. Lots of scraping going on there, of course.
Legally, of course.
Yes.
Legal scraping.
Yeah, right. GDPR compliant and everything. That's really the nice thing, by the way. We model large consumer groups. It's not personal data. Mm-hmm. We can use personal data to say something about a consumer segment, or we can do the surveys, but the databases for these type of models is just the data that is out there.
Now, when you talk about scraping, clearly many websites in and of themselves already have an inherent bias.
Oh, yes.
So when you're looking to try and take some of that, how do you account for that? How do you...
So there are ways to see, for example, sexism, all these type of biases. They come from somewhere. And there are certainly articles that have a way stronger bias than others, and you can also pinpoint those. Generally, we are less interested in what type of publication has what type of influence on the populace. We just are interested in how can we best predict what is happening in the populace. So in the end, putting it together or segmenting it by the specific target groups, that is our goal. So the bias that exists, unfortunately, kind of needs to make it into the model in order for us to be more accurate when it comes to predicting what people think and what they will do.
Okay. Any questions from
Any
audience?
questions?
Hi, this is a great presentation, by the way.
Yeah, thank you.
When you're scraping these websites for all
Right.
the billions of words that you have, how do you take into account context when assessing positive, negative associations, such as imagery, the colors, fonts, the purpose of the website in the first place?
Yeah. So we're starting to do that more and more. So we're now also including the image information to do a lot of relational things, because, for example, you can predict whether someone is an A-list celebrity if he appears with other A-list celebrities in Instagram photos. So that type of connection is meaningful, and we're starting to implement that and put it into these word embedding models. But so far, just using the text data, so just purely scraped, is enough to be very accurate in determining what are the automatic associations for people. But I think it can only get better. The thing is, I think for many of those things that you're mentioning, the use case is slightly different. So if we do like image lookup, we call this word to visual, where we use associations to create different types of images. So I haven't showed that here, but we have that in the works. Then those type of approaches are more important. But generally, right now, we don't take these type of context things into account, unless, of course, you're talking about polysemy, so a certain word having different meanings. Then we definitely take into account the context, because, well, it matters. Whether you talk about dove, the dove that's flying around, or dove, the brand, very different. Also, for example, in Italy, we learned that dove means where. So that is something that you need to know. And we do that, by the way, by knowing in what type of context it usually appears. So every time that we encounter it in the wild, we just check with that reference and say, all right, is it the instance of Dove the brand or the instance of Dove the animal? And then create that vector accordingly.
So how do we popularize this? I mean, clearly it's a very interesting technique. It has huge applications, particularly to things like news, to, I won't say propaganda, but let's say to lobbying, to canvassing around elections.
Yeah.
How do we get this out there? How do you have that influence to try and ensure that, the Russians aren't influencing every election that's being done in the Western world, as popular myth would have it?
Yeah, so that's a very good question. Right now, we are starting up collaborations with different agencies that are using this for their end clients. But to be honest, the end client has so far been our best partner. I hope there's not too many like creative agencies in the room, because what they certainly realize is that this will take away a lot of work from them, because creating the right images or getting the right associations for the brand that you should then use in the material, that comes right out of this model. So usually the end client uses it, and then with the agency is able to tell the agency exactly what they need to do, and basically have this as a control on always ensuring the right associations. But I think the bigger question, we are a startup, 15 people in the market for 3 years, and that's all great, but we don't have the legs to go to everyone and really popularize this in the big way. So I think we rely on partners to get this to the next level and to help more people realize what this can do. And the Chrome extension that I showed you, I think, would be a very easy way in. It's truly one-click functionality. Yeah. And that is right now our big bet, to see that people just adopt it and see how powerful it can be.
Well, actually, I think it would be fantastic if we could get it into some of those websites. Anyone else with a question from the audience? Yes, at the back.
Is the next stage of the evolution of this that 2, 3, 4 years down the line, that word association where you click on the word and change it to adventure or precision or things like that is going to be fully automated depending on the individual consumer? So that you just go onto a content, I might go onto the website and see a very different keywords to yourself, but it's just instantaneous as soon as the browser loads. So
the future, yes, but I think it will take some time to get there. The reason is that the issue of text generation and dynamic creativity, those are things that are still quite hard. They work in very finite spaces. So if you have a banner, 4 different positions, and then you can even humanly create lists, and the computer can just put it together. That is pretty straightforward. But when it comes to this type of creative copy and a car that has to hit certain types of associations, then you have 6 different consumer segments, and for each one it must be slightly changed. Having the human brain in the loop that can basically decide this is crazy, this is amazing, is still extremely important. it is similar again to IBM Watson's ability to read through 50,000 science papers and then tell the doctor, like, look, these are 10 things that kind of match. And the doctor can easily say, okay, this is, I don't know what this is nothing. Oh, this could be interesting. Oh, could be definitely it. I didn't even think of this. So it's more like, we call it the AI co-pilot, where, you know, the brand or the agency is still in the driver's seat, you know, holding the wheel. But the companion is there to just facilitate and to help them expand. You don't need to do brainstorming, basically. This can give you 1,000 associations in like this. But then it's still your job to think about it a little bit and put the right things together.
So you've gone through a day worth of data fusion. Last words of wisdom for all of us who are in the data fusion arena. What would you, knowing what you know in terms of the bias and stuff that comes out from the work that you've done?
Yeah, so we've also seen acceptance being a big issue. And there's a really funny, very interesting story that I found just truly fascinating that is a couple of years old of, I think it was a silver smelting industry. And the CEO said, like, okay, we don't care about stakeholder value anymore. The only thing that we care about is safety. And the company had a big issue with discipline and everything. And what he did was not like, we need to be more disciplined. No, it just said safety. And then, and keep in mind that that company didn't have any, had a very strong union. They were opposed to anything, any time tracking or whatever. And he just said safety, the most important thing. So immediately the stock went down. But then he was still the CEO, and over the years he just implemented all these safety measures, which is basically like this positive beacon of change. It's something that we can get all behind. I would say it's similar to like transparency or something. So, but it was all safety, and over the time you saw that people implemented safety, protocols, and more, and they saw the virtue of safety and what it can bring and how powerful it is. And in the end, the union said, we need to have time tracking, because otherwise, somebody who's tired will be on the job, and that's not safe. So I think it's acknowledging what associations mean, and then choosing routes that are easier than something else. Like saying, hey, your job may be gone in 20 years because of this technology. That's not something that people want to hear. But if you say, this increases your efficiency, this will make the processes more transparent, that is something that is also true, but that is much easier to get behind for your brain.
Nice thought to end on. Anyone with a final question? Then Jonathan, let me say thank you so much. That was a really thought-provoking presentation. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Please. Okay, so I just have a couple of final few words for you, just some housekeeping notes. We've had, by the way, just for those of you that are interested, we've had about 350 views on the live stream today. So while we've been 120-odd people in the room or so, 350 have been watching us from parts far and wide. So hello to everybody on the live stream. Thank you for joining us today. Don't forget to join us tomorrow. Please rate the speakers. You have the app. You know what to do. Green code on your badge. Log in. Rate the speakers. That would be fantastic. And then finally, I have great pleasure in inviting you, if I can find the clicker, if somebody can move the slide to me, to a little bit of fusion fun this evening. So literally about a 5-minute walk around the corner, there's a very nice little watering hole called the Green Room Bar. We're expected there at 6:30 this evening. If you'd like to join us in the lobby from about 6 o'clock on, there'll be people walking over to show you the way. Please come and have a glass of good cheer with us for this evening to kind of, let all that data fusion flow through you with the aid of something sparkling, cold, and alcoholic. Thank you so much for being with us today. We do start at 9 o'clock tomorrow, so when you're allowing that fusion to go through you, remember that it's a 9 o'clock start tomorrow morning, okay? But thank you all. Hope you've enjoyed the day. And remember, 6 o'clock in the bar, or 6 o'clock in the lobby, and we'll head to the bar. Thank you all very much indeed.